The history of Miami at defensive back is one of the best in college football. What did the Canes have for 2016? We bring in Cam Underwood from State of the U to help us break it down. Cam, you look pretty well set at safety. Let's start there. Jamal Carter, Rayshawn Jenkins, two very productive players.
Yeah, those are your two starters from day one, really. Those are last year I said that Miami had 3 NFL guys at safety, and that would be Deion Bush, Jamal Carter, and Rayshawn Jenkins. So as Deion Bush was a 4th-round draft pick and fighting for a starting job with the Chicago Bears, we're left with 2 NFL players who are both seniors. Jamal Carter is a 4th-year senior. Rayshawn Jenkins is a 5th-year senior, had a injury issue a couple years ago, so he took that 5th-year redshirt. But those are savvy players. You know, they're in their 20s. You know, you're 22, 23 years old, so not like an 18-year-old kind of freshman kid. But they're both really good. Jamal Carter is he's a freak. He looks like his physique is just he's chiseled out of stone. He's going to be more of your strong safety, you know, hitting harder, coming down into the box, maybe a little bit more in run support. He can have some mental errors and has made some mistakes in the past, so really looking for consistent play from him moving forward, especially when he's tasked with being in coverage. Those are sometimes when he has the ability, he has the skill level, he has the athleticism for it, but he just wouldn't really be consistent as often, you know, throughout his coverage assignments. So looking for that development from him. Presence at safety. Rayshawn Jenkins, he's, you know, the free safety. He has a lot of range. He's better in coverage than Carter is, so wouldn't surprise me to have him be the one. You know, they kind of flip-flop if they can. The formation kind of dictates which one would be in coverage. You know, have those 2 flip-flops, so that would be Jenkins over Carter. But both those guys are NFL guys. Both those guys, you know, should be, you know, in the conversation for maybe a 2nd, 3rd team All-ACC. It would take a really large leap forward for them to be in conversation for 1st team All-ACC or anything above that. But they do have the athleticism and the natural talent for that. I don't know if they have the skills and the production for that. But at safety, those 2, you know, it starts with those guys, and that's a good place to start.
So, yeah, it starts with 2 safeties. It starts with 2 corners, but obviously teams spread out the field. You've got a number of pretty elite passing attacks in the ACC, and hopefully you get to a championship game against a Clemson or Florida State, and you need more depth at least one of those 2 positions to match up against 3rd and 4th receivers. So any more depth than that at safety?
Yeah, that's a good question. We do have more depth at safety. You have Jaquan Johnson, who's a sophomore. He was 4 times 1st team All-Dade County in high school. There's like a handful of people who can say that. He played at one of the bigger classification schools too, so it wasn't like he was playing against, you know, the Little Sisters of the Poor. He, you know, was a very, very talented player. He's going to be your number 3 safety. He's also working in at nickel back a little bit too. He needs to be, like I talked about with Carter, more consistent even through the fall camp. Manny Diaz, our new defensive coordinator, saying, you know, sometimes he'll try to maybe do a little bit too much and, you know, use his instincts as opposed to really diagnosing the play. So, yeah, Jaquan Johnson, he's a guy who's going to play a lot of snaps for us at safety. Very talented guy. He's shorter than the other 2. Carter and Jenkins are both 6'1", 6'2". He's Jaquan Johnson's 5'9", 5'10", so he's smaller, but very, very talented player. Romeo Finley from Niceville, Florida. That's a real city, actually, up in the Panhandle. He's a freshman, just was in the last recruiting class. He's a bigger kid, 6'1", 205, 208-ish. He's going to be good for us. I think he's going to play more on special teams than in base defense this year, but he's exactly what Manny Diaz wants in a safety prospect or in a player at that position on this defense. So he'll be out there. Like I said, more on special teams than base defense, but he has a bright future, really looking maybe into the 2017-18 years for his main, you know, full-time defense contributions. But special teams counts too, so don't, you know, discount that. Another one is Cedric Wright. He went to Gulliver Prep with defensive end Deontay Mullins. He was All-American in high school. He's another talented player. Just enrolled a couple of days ago. So he's 5'9", 190 pounds. And he can play that same kind of Jaquan Johnson role where he's playing some safety and playing some nickel. So he's getting integrated into the system. We'll see how quickly he can pick it up since he was a latecomer after the start of fall practice. I think he got there. His first practice was practice number 9, and we've had 11 so far. So you see where he's kind of been in. Also, Jeff James from the Orlando area, if that name sounds familiar. He is the nephew of Edgerrin James of University of Miami and NFL fame. He only played 1 year of high school football, Jeff, that is, but he was second-team All-State at the 8A classification, the largest classification in the state of Florida, and had 8 interceptions and like 70-something tackles in that 1 year. So he is a little bit more raw than, some of these other prospects having that limited experience playing high school football, but coming from the family with, Edgerrin James, Javaris James, both of those guys played running back at Miami. I'm sure that there's more Jameses that I'm forgetting in that family. But yeah, definitely has the pedigree to be very good here. He's definitely a guy who I'm looking at to take a red shirt, Jeff James, that is. So, he probably won't be, 60, 70 tackles, freshman All-American this year. That's not what's going to happen. But, he's 6'1", 6'2", 190 pounds, so he's thin, he's fast, he has athleticism, and like I said, he has the pedigree to really be a good player here, maybe a rotation player in years to come.
Yeah, James, as you mentioned, out of Orlando, 57th rated at safety with just the 1 year of experience in high school, 57th rated according to ESPN. Finley, very highly regarded, 12th rated safety in this last February recruiting class. Just to set everyone up, Jamal Carter, 44 stops last year, a pick. And Rayshawn Jenkins, 3 tackles for loss, 3 interceptions at safety. Okay, let's move to corner, Cam. And you seem to be pretty well set there in regards to, obviously, Corn Elder's the guy that most people are familiar with and his production in recent years.
Yeah, Corn Elder moves up from the number, 3 corner to the number 1. We had, Tracy Howard and Artie Burns in front of him. Both of those guys left. Tracy Howard by graduation. Artie Burns left early, was a first-round draft pick by the Steelers. So now those 2 guys are gone. So Corn Elder goes from the slot number 3 guy to the number 1 corner. He's a little bit shorter than you would like, 5'9", 5'10", but he's stockily built. He's been a player here for 3 years. He's a true senior. He was a very highly touted athlete coming out of Tennessee, Nashville, the Ellsworth School, I want to say it was, when he was a prep player. So he's a guy who's people know his name. Obviously, he had the infamous touchdown return against Duke to win that game last year. So if you're thinking, hey, I know that guy, yes, you do. Also had pretty much game-winning interception against Nebraska in the 3rd game of last season. In overtime on their first play, they tried to kind of run a guy behind him, and there was nobody. He was playing zone and very smart, so he was like, okay, if I'm going zone, there's nobody in my zone, so I'm going to sink. And the quarterback threw it right to him, intercepted the ball. We get a field goal in the next possession and win. So, he's battle-tested. He's not the biggest or best guy at cornerback, but, I mean, he's a good college player. So, him in your top 2 rotation, depending on who you want to classify as 1 or 2, depending on what the matchups are for the other team. Yeah, Corn Elder, he's a good guy to have out there. Like I said, seasoned veteran, 4-year senior, been starting and playing for the last 2.5 of those years. So, pretty good. Yeah, on the other side, you have a battle for the number 2 corner, or the opposite side corner, whatever you want to classify it as, opposite of Corn Elder, who pretty much has his spot locked down. The 2 guys battling on that side are Adrian Colbert, who's a graduate transfer 5th-year senior coming from the University of Texas. He played a lot of safety in his time at Texas, but we're putting him strictly at corner. He's 6'2", about 200 pounds, a track guy in high school and college, so he has track speed, and he's very smart. He's very savvy. In the first scrimmage or in one of the practices, he had an interception of Brad Kaya, and they were running a smash route, so that's a corner route and then like a curl. So you read it, short to long, and so Brad he kind of faked Brad out like he was going to jump the curl, and then when he saw Brad go to his next read, he sunk back in front of the corner and he intercepted the ball. And Brad Kaya was pissed about it. Like you could tell after he joked about it after practice and his media availability on the video that Hurricane Sports put out, but he was like, yeah, no, he tricked me once. He's not going to do it again. And you could see Adrian Colbert in a different video. He heard Brad say that, and he kind of rolled his eyes like, yeah, okay. So he definitely has a little swagger to him, and he's been playing really well, Colbert, that is. So every report that we've gotten from camp, he's playing fast, he's playing strong. He's doing his job, and he's really in the mold of Mike Rumpf, who is our new cornerbacks coach, who went to Miami, is 6'2" and was a first-round draft pick. So he sees a lot of himself in Colbert. So that's been a very good connection there. So even if Colbert doesn't start, he's going to play a lot of snaps. The other person he's competing with is a true sophomore, Sheldrick Redwine. He is, like I said, he started a couple games last year, played a lot of rotation snaps. He was high school teammates with Jaquan Johnson before coming to the University of Miami. So he's a guy who has some talent. He might see Colbert take the starting job, but Redwine's going to play a lot of snaps. And being a sophomore versus a fifth-year senior, Redwine still has miles to go and years to develop. So those are the two other guys who are really fighting at the top of the cornerback rotation. Past that, it gets kind of scary, honestly. But if those three guys play well and stay healthy, combining that with what we have at safety, where we have maybe 3 or 4 guys who can play, that gives you 7 defensive backs. You might need a couple more, but with the trio of Elder and Colbert and Redwine at the top of the cornerback rotation, we'll be okay.
I think the scary comment answered my next question, because I'm always going to ask the confidence question about that particular unit. But as you know, I think most of the teams across the country, even the top teams, are pretty much in the same situation in units where you need depth. So that's typically offensive line, defensive line, and in the secondary where you need 5-6 players that can contribute and be steady and be reliable. And you typically have about 3 or 4 guys coming back, and you need, out of a bunch of 6 or 7 guys, you need about 2 or 3 that are going to step up and fill the gap and be dependable and reliable by game 2 or 3. So that sounds like what the situation is for you.
Yeah, that's definitely our situation. At corner, behind those 3, it falls off pretty steep. Ryan Mays is a 3rd-year, 4th-year junior out of Crop. He's a bigger kid. He's another 6'2" corner who has some athleticism, and he's actually made some strides forward in this camp. So he's probably going to lock down that number 4 cornerback spot. Not really expecting too much from him, but if he can be steady and not be burnt toast when he comes into the game, I think that'll be a good thing. Definitely going to be a contributor on special teams as well. Again, those are units that definitely matter, because it's a third of your interaction on the field, offense, defense, special teams. Michael Jackson, yes, that is his real name. He hails from Alabama. He is number 28 in your program. He is another safety. I think he's a sophomore, I want to say, or a redshirt sophomore. He's going to probably be that number 5 guy behind Mays. He has length and he has some good skills, but, it's really looking like he needs another mango season or 2 before he becomes a real high rotation guy. Outside of that, Malik Young is a true freshman. He was All-American this past year from Coconut Creek High School, played with a bunch of guys, Trayvon Mullen, who went to Clemson, Benjamin Victor, who went to Ohio State, cornerback and wide receiver, respectively. So the trio of them were all All-Americans from Coconut Creek. So Malik Young comes in with a bunch of accolades, obviously, behind him. A couple of recruiting guys from down here in South Florida saw him as a freshman, 700, 800 days ago, and said, this is going to be the guy when he's a senior. So very high praise from early age, optimist, and all the way through high school. So he is a guy who can come in and maybe contribute. He's working at a return spot, in the return rotation for punt returns, I believe. Definitely a fast guy, played both ways in high school, but we're going to play him definitely exclusively at cornerback and college. He's in that 5'10" kind of range, but he does have some positive athleticism, so that's a good thing. Outside of that, and I'm trying not to click over to the matrix on the State of the U, which is our scholarship matrix page that has all the scholarship players. Outside of Mays and Jackson and Young,
that seems to be the rundown. I think you covered the ground like you typically do, Cam. Good stuff. Miami secondary, that's the lineup with about 3 weeks to the opener. Cam Underwood from State of the U helping us out on the secondary for the U. Thanks a lot, Cam.
No problem. Have a good one.